Bing bong.
This is the iDanSimpson Show.
We do it because it's right.
I love the dialectic.
His testicles became swollen.
Based.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
Please clap.
Who's this man? This man in the hat. I'm gonna ruin this.
You're a stupid baby down, not me.
Yes. Awesome. Holy smokes. I can't believe that just happened. All that stuff. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Leftist Chill with iDanSimpson. I am iDanSimpson. It me, where I talk with cool people and they're always based, okay? And they're never cringe. Just like my guest today. Please clap for Matthew J. Hunter. Please clap. Yes.
Please clap.
There you go. Matthew J. Hunter, your name is not what it says in the chat. Ignore chat. Okay. How you doing today, Matt? Good to be with you again.
Good.
Welcome in. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I'm always excited to do these. I rarely get invited onto other people's shows just because I'm not that type of person that goes on other people's shows or streams often. So it's always nice, now being like technically a repeat guest here. It feels nice. Feels good.
We call you returning champions, and you are a returning champion. After our last chat, I thought we had a good vibe. I was like, I would love to do this again, and here we are. And thank you for being with me today. Really stoked to get to know you a little bit more, chat about some stuff. Try to feel out what how you're thinking about the whole world, the entire thing. Yeah. So.
Everything.
Really excited to be with you. Why don't you give yourself the big shout out? What do you do, and where can people find you doing it? As I understand, you're a podcaster and documentarian. We chatted about some of the work that you've done previously. Go ahead and tell folks about your work.
You can find my work at Trending Now Network on YouTube, especially, also Patreon as well. I don't do it as often anymore just because of my day jobs have just been far more time consuming. Shout out to late stage capitalism, I guess. And, I've, usually try to do at least a show bi-weekly, I guess, do a live stream there. And, occasionally I would do a documentary. I haven't done one yet. I do plan on doing one about Karl Marx and Engels, like a feature length documentary, Oliver Stone-esque. For those that ever watched maybe like The Untold History of America on Netflix when it was on there for years back in the day,
okay.
That's definitely the vein of my style of documentaries. So if you like that, check it out, of course. And for my day job, I mean, if anyone likes combat sports, I'm a videographer, I guess, even though that's not as much of what I do anymore. I'm more of a operations manager, and I'm also getting my license as a matchmaker. So if you're into combat sports, hit me up as well. We need more leftists in that community. It's a very, very neo-fascist community. Oh, to its core, absolutely. And I can go on tangents about that. But it's always good to see, other lefties in that space. But anyways, yes, find me on all forms of social media as Matt Hunter MCR. And usually, I post what I'm up to. So if you are curious, you can always hit me up there as well.
Awesome. Sounds good. And thank you again, Matt, for joining me today. We're going to chat, I think, about a couple different things as we brainstormed some ideas before you joined me. And I'm wondering what you want to start with. How about we just start at the top of the list? It's on the list. And we're thinking Ukraine. Did you know the war's still going on? Well, hold on a second. Let's start with today. It's like literally today. Happy 420. Happy 420, Matt. Yeah.
Happy 420 to everyone listening as well and watching.
Happy 420 to everyone at home. I'm going to go ahead and roll a joint if that's cool. And then we can imbibe together. I don't know how you prefer to imbibe. I think maybe I saw a vape kind of guy, vape kind of thing.
My My girlfriend has the bongs and stuff in her rooms. I'm sitting here in the office
Of course.
with
So
the pen, you know.
we'll keep it classy in the office. No, I dig it. Do you also like to smoke flower, or do you prefer vape?
No, this is flower to be.
That is flower. Fuck yeah. Okay, great.
No, yeah, absolutely, yes. I've been a avid habitual smoker for way too long. You know, but back before it was illegal in California. That's how long I've been smoking. Weed.
Oh, that's when I started smoking weed when it was legal.
Oh my God, I remember that happened. That was
Yeah.
that was changing for a lot of things. So then, like Oregon, also legalized, and I moved to Oregon like right around that time as well for college.
You're spoiled.
So that was nice. That was nice.
Yeah.
And Oregon stuff is cheaper.
Yeah.
A little bit nice too. So it was a good time. Good time to be a weed connoisseur, as they say.
It is. Yeah. They're still doing the war on drugs. They're still prosecuting people. It sucks, but yeah. Generally speaking, it does feel good to be a little bit privileged in that sense. I'm in Illinois, where it's also legal to purchase, and yeah, I just wish I could grow legally. I'd have to get my own medical card or whatever. Just let me grow. Did you know it's a plant and you could just grow it? Just let me grow it. You know.
But Illinois doesn't allow you guys to grow like even a minimum amount or maximum amount of plants.
No, when they passed the law, it didn't include it. They were going to include it, and then it got taken out. And I would love to actually figure out. I'd love to have been in the room when that happened, right? To have been a fly on the wall. But no, only if you have a medicinal card. If you have, you go get the consultation and etc. Yeah.
I remember I had my card back in the day. I think it allowed me for 6 plants to grow. I want to say when I had my medical card back before it was illegal, you know, recreationally. I want to say I forget the exact California law. I want to say it's 4 plants for recreational users you can have in your residence.
Sounds about right. Yeah. Gosh, I would love that for sure. I would absolutely love it. Yeah. So we spent the morning talking about 420, digging into that, and hearing some stories about people who's who are still being prosecuted. They're getting 5 years. Someone just got 5 years for selling weed. It's just like, come on, nonviolence. What are we doing, dude? Yeah.
I'm going down to the South for like a documentary on boxing champion back in the day. And then we went to Florida as well. We went to Alabama. We drove from New York to Alabama, and then we went to Florida. We got pulled over once, and it did not smell legal. And luckily there was a mishap with like the rental car paperwork, so the cop didn't want to deal with it and just let us go.
Whoa.
I can't believe it to this day. Like in the South too. Very few people are lucky. That's true.
Yeah, we take those when we get them for sure. Wow. Well, they probably didn't think you were black. They're like, this guy's not black, right? Let him go.
I was the only white guy in the car.
Oh, okay. So maybe I'm wrong. I'm happy to be wrong.
And I wasn't driving, so it's not like I was like as usually the white friend in the group. I'm always the one that's driving.
Yeah.
So I wasn't even the driver in this instance, and we still got let go. It was nice. It again was very, very surprising. I've been arrested in L.A. for weed, and pulled over to a police station overnight. Like that stuff happens in L.A. where it's like the pot capital of the world in a sense, and in terms of marketability, and it's definitely extremely harsh still here. Like there's certain cities within like the county that no longer allow shops because they would just raid them all the time. And then they just became a hassle. So they just like outlawed them in a sense. Tons of cities.
What the fuck, man?
So you can be driving through LA County and go from one city to another city within LA still in a sense, right? And all of a sudden you just find no shops.
The fuck?
You go from Carson to Long Beach to Lakewood to Bellflower, like Garden Grove, like most of these cities don't have shops.
That's stupid. We were talking about weed today. We looked into, actually, I don't know, Ben Burgess. I don't know if you're a Ben Burgess guy. He had a piece in Jacobin about like nationalizing and nationalizing pot shops like federally and having victims of pot bad pot policy work these places, sort of like what they have in, I can't remember which state, but they have like liquor. They sell liquor out of like government stores. That'd be a nice step in the right direction. What do you think?
I know that like certain states have tried to do it, like they're like ABC stores, where it's like they're government like liquor stores, right? They're state liquor stores, and then they want to sell them out of state weed stores. I mean, the only like issue with that is like, in a sense, it's still not like it's nationalized. It's not like it's a public sector industry still, just because it's out of ABC stores. The distribution, manufacturing will still 100% be privatized.
Yeah.
So it's like a different coat to the same system in a way. Yeah. To be quite honest, the government just might, or at least the state, might get more of its cut that way. Because a lot, if it's not ABC stores and you just have your own private store, a lot of these private stores and shops, they sell illegally on the side all the time. Because you can make way more money, move a lot more product doing that.
Oh, that's something I didn't think of. So, argument is it's not the solution. It's perhaps at best a little Band-Aid on the problem.
Like if often we know in leftist circles we talk about like reparations, right? Like when we talk about like reparations to the incarcerated community for marijuana, how do we do that? Well, part of it's probably nationalizing some sectors of the marijuana industry. And if America became socialist today, right? Like, and if we're like working off of that, like hypothetical, like you would have to nationalize that industry, because then you can repurpose the surplus value from that industry to where it needs to go socially. And that's why you need that, mechanism, because the private sector won't do that, because the private sector, capitalism, has no incentive to reshuffle its surplus value to society at large. It has an incentive to repurpose that surplus value back into the market, back into commodity production, to make more commodities, to make more money.
Sounds like some real Marxist shit, dude.
Once you start reading Stalin, like everything just like you start sounding like a communist with everything.
Where'd you learn such a dirty word?
I want to do this for people in your chat too, because I do notice that people in chat are of a ambiguous leftist ideology spectrum. Like I don't like see a lot of like hardcore Marxist Leninists or even like anarchists like in the chat. It's a lot of progressives, a lot of people that are leftists, Bernie socialists, Bernie socialists. Haha. If you guys have any questions in the chat for like a card carrying communist, like cool. I would love to answer any of your questions, any of the topics you have. It could be about anything in this space. You have a communist on the line for like an hour. So if you have any, real serious questions about this matter, you have any concerns about this matter, shoot away. I am all for it. I may not be an expert in anything, but I do have an opinion about everything, so that helps.
Love to hear it. Yeah, chat, hit us up. Let's fucking go. This is our chat to chat with Matthew, and I'm again stoked that we got the opportunity. Well, that sort of brings us to then talking about CPUSA, your work with the Communist Party USA, right? Hold on. So I feel like I have to address like an elephant in a room. Isn't that where some of these like cringe streamers are like associated with, or am I making that up? Like some of the like Haas and the Jason Hinkle guy.
Haas and Jackson Hinkle. Jackson Hinkle specifically, because I know he tried to infiltrate my district and my club in particular. Jackson Hinkle is not a member of the Communist Party.
Okay.
Haas is not a member of the Communist Party.
Okay.
They have been telling their viewers, their followers, whatever you want to call them, that they should infiltrate the Communist Party and take over CPUSA from the revisionists, opportunists, woke SJW communists, whatever their argument is.
But they're not even in it. They're not even in.
And I would say this for anyone that like is on social media and they see like those types of people, ask them what club they're in. Like ask them what district they're in. Like you will never see or like a open Communist Party member on social media not tell you what club they're in. Often we're very proud of it and we want to talk about it. We want to tell you what's happening there, you know.
Yeah.
And the idea of being secretive about it is not really true when it comes to open communists on social media. You know, like, yeah, the CPUSA is maybe discreet when it comes to like working with unions and stuff, you know, like working with Amazon Labor Union.
Okay.
You know, most people don't know that one of the first people Chris Smalls hugged when he ran out of the building was a CPUSA member. Like, most people don't know that.
Which person? Which person?
I don't know if they want to like publicly talk about
Fair.
this.
Okay.
So I won't say who it is, but one of the first people in that group
Have a guess.
that they're all celebrating is a CPUSA member. You know,
Nice.
the New York clubs were heavily involved in organizing with Amazon Labor Union. Do we go and, you know, shout that to the rooftops? No, because of red baiting still in
Love your face.
21st century.
Mhm.
So I think, again, if you see those types of people out there, the Haas followers, sycophants, like ask them what club they're in. Because I guarantee you they won't tell you what club they're in because they're not actually in a club. You know, it's a few thousand people on social media, on Twitch that are honestly fascists. Like they're modern day Strasserites. And that was a vein of the Nazi Party back in the 1930s. Like they're a modern day incarnation of that, where it's this fascist iteration that likes to co-opt very overtly socialist rhetoric, socialist policies, even at times.
Okay. Real quick, you timed out just a little bit there. Can you just name the name of the group that you were talking about? Because we got the description, I think.
The Strasserites.
Strasserites. All right, hold on. Let's hold my hand through this. You could probably help me in chat and learn something new. Which is literally, I don't know how much you watch my stream. I don't expect you to watch it at all. I wouldn't watch it.
I do watch it occasionally.
Shitty.
Stop that.
I don't have a very good stream.
I'll be honest though.
Yeah.
I'm more of a YouTube guy than a Twitch guy, so I'll go on YouTube and see your videos and watch them there because you know you title them. They're a little bit shorter. It's a little bit easier to find.
I'm doing that now. I'm doing the YouTubes.
Okay.
All right. And we do have a question in chat. Maybe we can address this now. Maybe we can address it later. Let me know if you want to, whatever you want. We see you some more. We see you. We see you. We're just going to try to thread it in when it fits, okay? Strasserism. Strasserism. Oh, it's German. It's a strand of Nazism. I hate Nazis. Do you like Nazis? Quick.
No.
Oh, that was the right answer. Good job.
Hey, also, hot take, we should not arm Nazis.
What the fuck, man? Can you believe how many people are trying to convince me that I don't want to arm Nazis enough? Right? That's their argument. When you boil it down, am I wrong?
It's hilarious, man. It honestly is. I love it. Left anti-communism is alive and strong.
What the fuck, dude? Okay. And this is me as not a very good geopolitical understander. I'm like, come on, guys. This is an easy one. Okay. Strasserism, a strand of Nazism, calls for a more radical, mass action, and worker-based form of Nazism, espousing economic anti-Semitism above other anti-Semitic forms to achieve a national rebirth. So it sort of goes to show you that Nazism was not worker-based, so people cannot say it was socialism. It just had the word socialism in the fucking title. Like, it was an ethno-state.
You might have seen this video, but Dan over at 3 Arrows over on YouTube that does like those long-form like video essays. He did the famous one with Jordan Peterson back in the day. I believe it's the Jordan Peterson ones specifically. He talks about like the claim that like that Nazism is socialism. You know, Jordan Peterson said that.
Don't.
So
I mean, yes, please, but no, don't do that. Anybody.
Where that concept kind of comes from is the Strasserites. You know, that vein of the Nazi Party that was more left leaning than the Hitler outright fascist right.
Yeah.
I forget what part in the video, but I believe he talks about Strasser, and he even quotes him very well in that video. Highly recommend it for your viewers.
All right. Do you know this trick? Open up the transcript.
Oh no, what? Oh, that's right. Oh man.
Strasser.
Hey, man, that's why you're the super producer, man.
I'm fucking amazing. Everyone loves me. I don't know. It didn't work. So that's why no one loves me.
He might have done like 2 or 3 videos with Jordan Peterson, to be honest. So it might not be this one.
Fair enough. But yeah, that is a wild argument, by the way. Down the argument rabbit hole we go. Strasserism. Yes.
Back to like Haas and like Jackson Hinkle and like all those groups, like
right.
They espouse such a strong version of like American patriotism
What the fuck?
That is very in line. And again, commingling it with this leftist rhetoric, right? This communist rhetoric at times as well, which is a little bit different than the Strasserites. They never outright went like, we're communists, but we're also like American patriots. Like, go America, fuck yeah. Like, they weren't like, we're communists, go Germany. They're like, no, we're not communists. We're the real socialists, right? Like, that's how the Strasserites functioned. And then Hitler sort of took over the party. Jackson Hinkle and Haas and those guys, they want to, in a very, again, to the book fascist like definition, they want to harken back to this mythology of America. And they want to be able to, again, co-opt maybe, let's say, the history of the labor movement in America. That is something we can be proud of, and say we can combine it with Americana symbolism.
Okay.
And that is something that people need to be very worried of. And again, the Communist Party has no connection to them. We in a sense, to use the old term, purged them when they tried to infiltrate the party.
Oh my gosh. But somehow in my head I associated them, and maybe that's like part of their fucking strategy, dude. If I'm over here putting on my tinfoil hat, yeah.
That Caleb Maupin, who's
Caleb Maupin. Now I called him the Nazbol Rick Astley. Is that inaccurate? Do you think they're more Strasserite than Nazbols?
Oh, that was so good.
No one asked for a Nazbol Rick Astley, but we still got one.
So good. I love that. He created an organization that is one letter off from CPUSA. It's CPI USA. So it's like you can, like they have very clearly tried to co-opt CPUSA history of the labor movement, leftist ideology and rhetoric with this American exceptionalism that is non-compatible, to be quite honest. Because if you look at America's history, it is very much antithetical to any sort of socialist venture or socialist ideology. Okay,
so we're saying a dialectical understanding of history, of a material analysis of history, shows that America doesn't do good things. Its foreign policy is to do bad things to other people. And
America is not a symbol we should ever uphold.
Yeah.
There's a reason why, like, the Soviet Union didn't use the flag of Tsarist Russia. Okay. There's a reason it changed cities' names, even. Like, there's a reason, like, it changed a lot of aspects of society because it wanted to remove the stain of Tsarism. Which was, I forget the exact way it was phrased, but like the prison house of nations was what Tsarist Russia was called. Because it had 100+ nations within this empire that were deeply oppressed, deeply within serfdom until like the 1870s, much later than most countries. And they removed all of that symbology. It came back post, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, as we know. But, if we were to ever envision a post-American capitalism, where it's a socialist, communist, whatever you want to say it in terms of its leftist framework, it has to be something that decolonizes the society, decolonizes the government, decolonizes this instance civilization, because this civilization is rooted deeply on colonialism, deeply on genocide, deeply on the worst forms of capitalism. So we need to be aware of that. When we talk about land back for indigenous nations. Like there's reality to that. Like there has to be a power switch here at some point because this isn't ours. It was deeply stolen, and it was robbed at gunpoint. So we just need to be aware of that, honestly speaking. And when we talk about chemical warfare, it's connected to Ukraine, I guess, or Syria or wherever, where the U.S. has tried to say that our enemies are using chemical warfare. Don't forget that American colonialists used biological warfare to wipe out untold millions of people in the Americas. So again, be aware of our history. It's very important. And Haas and Jackson Hinkle are not aware of it. They want to ignore it. They want to commingle all these things because they have no coherent ideology. They're fucking jokesters. Like they're con men in like the worst way form.
So you're telling me you didn't go to the Center
No.
for Political of Innovation Advice you to free America from the neoliberal empire? So they're like using like terminology that if you were like only vaguely aware of like leftism, you might get sucked into this. But that's the thing. That's me. I'm describing me, and I didn't get sucked into this. Right?
But
I saw through it to give myself a tiny bit of credit.
They're definitely marking themselves towards the ex alt-right people, if that makes sense. Like people that are on Reddit a lot, the 4chan community that have a lot of fascist tendencies. But they're anti-America, maybe, like let's say like the Bundy guys, I bet they would love the Bundy guys over was in Oregon and Washington, right? Where, the Bundy militias, the anarchists that were rebelling against the government.
Yeah. Eamon Bundy. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
They were like pointing guns and snipers at cops.
Yes. Like for example, they were for the trucker, convoy up in Canada that, I mean, I don't know how many leftists were sulking.
Those are the leftists
you have any
that were for it. I get it now. I didn't understand. Like everyone kept talking about leftists that were for it. I'm like, who? No one I know.
It was them. That was the group.
The Flu Trucks clan. Also, Peter Coffin. You think fits in that?
Yes, he does. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank God I don't watch. I never really watch any of their content. So I really don't know what most of these people are like. I've only like been forced to see clips on social media because it comes up on my feed of people like Jackson Hinkle or like or Haas. And again, I know of Jackson Hinkle because he tried to infiltrate our club, and even doxed like a senior member within the district and within the club. Somebody that's been there for decades. So these are people that are in a sense dangerous. Like let's not kid ourselves here. Like they are people that definitely want to co-opt whatever gains we are looking for, and we should be very wary of them.
So I'm wondering who the people are then that are supporting them, right? Because they know what they're doing. They know who they're agitating and they know who they're pissing off, and therefore who they're getting their support from, right? Yeah. So they know that they're pissing off actual communists doing work. They're wasting your like revolutionary time and energy by infiltrating your group and fucking around with it, right? So then who are the people that support them? Who are the people historically? This is a quiz. Who are the people historically, Matthew J. Hunter, that hate communists? Go.
Fascists.
Oh, you nailed it. 100%. 100%. Absolutely. In fact, it was actually one of the things that pulled me super left was finding out how much Nazis hated the Russian communists. Right? What do we say? Soviet communists? I'm sorry, being ham-fisted here with the language.
No, that's fine. I mean, okay. either one's fine.
Okay, right. So, and I was like, oh, wow. Well, they killed like 6 million Jews, and that's fucking terrible. How many communists in Russia did they kill? Like 27 million, right? Like, holy shit. They didn't ever teach me this in school. And that's sort of one of those things that made me go, wait, why didn't they? And you start to piece it together, you know?
I don't know if you saw that viral video in Ukraine of Ukrainian soldiers walking up to like an elderly couple. And the elderly couple thought that they were Russian soldiers, and they came out with the Soviet flag. And like we're like weeping, like we're like happy, like the liberators were here, right?
I'm sorry. We have to shut this down. We're not allowed to talk about these kinds of things on Twitch. They might ban me, Matthew. We can't talk about other things. You know what I mean? What Western media doesn't want to show. I think it might get banned for this. But here's the thing. I think it's worth it. I'm gonna let you finish. I hate to interrupt. But I'm gonna let you finish. But you go ahead and finish. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, you're right.
That was so good. And
Shoot your shot, King.
the soldiers are pretending to be Russian. And the elderly woman, like a grandma, right? Like almost like great grandma. Like she is old. She's holding the flag, right? And she hands it to the who she thinks is the Russian soldiers, and then they throw it on the ground and start trampling on it. And she looks at it and she goes like, "That's the flag like my father died for." Like it's such a tragic moment, and there's been tons of that. I don't like you have to really, I think, follow the right people, and you have to be lucky on social media to see this stuff, I guess. But you see that a lot with this older generation of Ukrainians that have been seeing the Russians come in, and they don't view it as this like inter-imperialist war that like you see like a lot of people try to say even on the left in the U.S. They view it as like this harkening back to Russian liberation, Soviet liberation as well. And that's why they come out with the Soviet Union flag. And it's something like Michael Prenti said, like we have a debt to pay to the Soviet Union that we will probably never be able to repay. Like their ability to stop fascism. Like if it wasn't for the Soviet Union, if it wasn't for Stalingrad, fascism would have won. Like that's just the reality. Obviously in the West, especially post, let's say like the Great Generation market ploy, if we want to call it that, with Saving Private Ryan, stuff like that, Band of Brothers, we shifted our perspective to like D-Day as like this real pivotal moment. But if you talk to any historian, any World War II historian, they will tell you outright, even ones that aren't socialists, aren't leftists in any way, they'll tell you D-Day was not the pivotal moment in the war. It was Stalingrad. That broke the back of Nazi Germany. And it took, again, 27 million Soviet soldiers, civilians dying at the hands of fascists to stop fascism in Germany. And I want to say it was General Zhukov, right, who obviously just got his statue pulled down in Kharkiv, I want to say it was, in Ukraine by Ukrainian soldiers who liberated the city from fascists back in World War II. He famously said, like, we saved Europe from fascism, but they'll never forgive us. And we still see that, even though, again, the flag, the country of Russia is no longer socialist, no longer communist, whatever you want to call it. We still see that like hatred from the West towards a nation and groups of nations that did everything in their power to stop fascism, a little bit under 120 years ago. So we have this internal debt to them, that every communist, every socialist walking around has a debt to pay to them. And how you repay that debt is by ending capitalism. That's the goal. Like that's how you do it. And it takes a lot of us. So think about that. Like I always think about that when it goes into organizing, when it goes into what I produce, what I make. Like there's like weights. There is this insurmountable weight of generations behind us that have died for this. The anniversary for the Paris Commune was, I think, like a month ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of progressives know about the Paris Commune, but it was, for all intents and purposes, like the first socialist society, if you want to call it that.
If I could just pause you right there, I just gotta say, like, those two things, Battle of Stalingrad, over 1 million Russians died, right? Paris Commune. Here's the thing. Steven Spielberg hasn't made a movie about these things, so they didn't really happen. You know what I mean? This is how we just kind of. It's just like how like the Western left sort of looks at the world. You know, the lib left. They don't know these things. They don't know about these things. And again, that's one of the things that made me a lib when I was. Is we just weren't taught about that. Like, we're only taught about D-Day. We're taught they make all these movies about XYZ, but not the other things that obviously give us a better, more comprehensive view of history, so that we can do a material analysis, which is just being able to look at what actually happened in the world, and then hopefully fucking people are doing it from a class conscious perspective. You left off right there at Paris Commune. What did you anything you wanted to say about that?
Oh, I'm just the Paris Commune. I mean, for those that don't understand or don't know about it, Karl Marx wrote, in a sense, a whole essay about it, which is basically just 3 different speeches he gave to the International that was compiled into an essay called The Civil War in France. I highly recommend people check out. It's a great, also, like, if you don't understand, like, historical material analysis, like, that's a good text to understand, like, what that looks like. Like, how does someone explain an event in history through that lens? And State and Revolution by Lenin. Lenin gets heavily into the nature of the Paris Commune and how that is a archetype, if you want to call it that, for the dictatorship of the proletariat, the socialist state, socialist society, you know, the lower stage, the lower phase of communism, as it's called as well. The Paris Commune was that first iteration of it, and it was workers in the middle of this giant war between France and Prussia saying, fuck this, we're out. And in Paris, revolting and taking the whole city over for months, forming their own government. It's really intense. And then obviously France came in, and Prussia, they allied against this revolution just in Paris. And they crushed. There's the stories of, you know, French troops marching and killing, you know, thousands of men, women, and children in Paris. It's horrifying. You know, like this reaction against what we're doing is brutal. You know, that's also something to think about. Like, we have, like, it's one of the first things I was always taught in the party was, like, to some degree, you have to be discreet, because the amount of repression against communism is huge. And you can get you fired. It can get you in a lot of mess. You know, I had a friend going through immigration, trying to get their green card status, right? And they had a huge questionnaire, right, for immigration. 20 of the questions, I'm spitballing here, but it seemed like 20 of the questions were about, do you have any affiliation with the Communist Party? Do you know any Communist Party members? Like, and this is something that, like
it's a joke, right? Yeah, this is that meme. Like, I am, and I never have been a member of the Communist Party. Like, we've been making the same jokes for decades.
And it's still there. It's still there. Like, if you're trying to immigrate to the U.S. and you are a Communist Party member, you cannot disclose that, because you cannot immigrate to the United States. You know, California, you know, California, as, you know, the alt-right calls it, right?
Hollywood, LOL, right?
You can't be a public school teacher and be a Communist Party member, technically.
No.
Yes.
No. Matthew, you don't know that. You don't know something. We have freedom here in the United States. Okay. You must have missed that day of middle school. Is that? Well, I'll have to look into that. Oh no.
It really hasn't been enforced that much, to be honest. But it's on the books, and it's not the only state that technically outlaws Communist Party members working for the government, in a sense. You cannot work for the government if you want to, revolt against the government.
Matt, one of my favorite things is taking something that's not about me and then I make it about me. And no, this is sort of about me. I got into talking about politics and left politics and honestly figuring out what is left politics. What does that mean? Oh, socialism and communism. What are those things? And I had to figure them out. And I'm 36, 37 years old, right? And I didn't get into this realizing I'd become a communist. And then, like, maybe one day I'd have to get another job and ask them for a job. And they're going to be like, hey, what did you do? And I tell them, like, I talked about communism and it's a good thing. And they're like, wait, what does that mean? I'm like, well, it means that I think what you're doing is evil. Have you ever heard of the labor theory of value? And guess what? They may not have heard it, but they very, very much understand how it works because they're on the receiving end of it, right? So that's going to be a really tricky day if I ever have to get another job.
Yeah. My boss knows I'm a communist, and like he's an immigrant, and so he kind of just jokes about it, like he knew communists back home. He's not a communist at all.
Where are they from? Is
the Philippines?
Oh, okay.
So yikes. Yes, and it's one of those things where there's definitely times where the difference in our worldview does clash, because I have to work with them all the time. There's only 3 or 4 people in the company. I have to work with them. But
at the end of the day, that's all bosses. But yeah, go on, right?
But I always come in with my communist shirt on, just just to piss off people. It's great. I love it.
Based. That is based. I love how this. We got us a little freewheeling chat right here. It's going everywhere it wants to be. How about this?
Now's the good time to talk about.
Yeah, where do you want to go? What do you want to talk about?
In the chat.
There's
a question for me about.
Is someone mad?
No, it was about the Soviet Union, and I forget how they framed it about state capitalism.
Hit it.
And I'll say this: I forget exactly how the question was framed from the person in the chat. I apologize. But the concept of state capitalism is one that I think gets misconstrued quite a bit. Here's a question. Thank you. How do you avoid creating state capitalism like the USSR? Because the framing of this question, I think, is off, right? The Soviet Union is a country that saw, for example, a 65% jump in life expectancy, a 400% jump in real income, on average. It's a country that saw gigantic improvements in quality of life and economic development, and in a way that is probably unseen in human history until we get to China in the last 30 years. So the idea of trying to avoid what the USSR was, I think, is misunderstanding what the USSR was. The USSR was a socialist society. Whether you want to call it state capitalism or socialist, I think is one of those things where you get lost. You lose the forest for the trees, right? You kind of do that. Because if you read, let's say, Richard Wolff, who has an excellent long book on, I think it's called class history in the USSR, I think is the name of the book. And Richard Wolff, I know, is a one that a lot of social democrats, progressives go to for their understanding of these things. He refers to the Soviet Union as state capitalism. If you read things from Michael Parenti, who was a CPUSA member at one point in time, as well. And obviously, for those who don't know, read Black Shirts and Reds if you want to understand the USSR more, especially in this context. But the USSR was a system that was, in a sense, in war communism for a very, very long time and probably never left that stage, meaning that it retooled its society, its nationalization, its collectivization to defend itself from counter-revolution and invasion. And the reason why they did that is because obviously you have, the revolution, the first February Revolution and the October Revolution, which is the real Bolshevik Revolution. But just years after that, you have the Russian Civil War, where you have 14, I think it's around 14 Western nations invading the Soviet Union, as well as the funding of the White Army, which was a pro-czarist, or had pro-czarist elements as well, was deeply anti-Semitic. You can find vast stories about the White Army going through entire villages and towns, murdering all of the Jewish and Romani people there. Deeply horrific stories. And that killed millions of people. And that was after World War One, which the Soviet Union ended because they didn't want to be in it anymore, which killed millions of people as well. So within its creation, you have a gigantic world war, you have a gigantic civil war, which involves the world as we know it, and if what we think about the modern nations of the West, they all invade. That's a world war in and of itself. The U.S. sent, I think it was like 30,000 Marines into Russia. Like people don't know this history.
No idea.
It's okay. And again, millions of people dying. And then it's a post-feudal society, deeply illiterate, deeply backwards economically in terms of its development. Okay. And they all are predicting, the leadership in the Soviet Union is predicting we have 20, 30 years at most till they come back. And what happens in 20, 30 years? They come back. Right. And in the meantime, it's also something that I think gets left off the table. People don't understand. It has to do with Ukraine as well. The class struggle, the class war that happened, especially in the countryside, between the kulak class and the peasantry, that happened in the late 20s and in the early 30s as well. Where the kulaks killed upwards of 50 to 70 to 80% of livestock. Would destroy millions and millions of acres of arable land that was theirs that they didn't want to get collectivized. And the funny part is that if my memory serves me correctly, that like Stalin especially was pushing against rapid collectivization because he didn't want to force this class struggle. And what happened is that the peasants took it upon themselves mostly to force this class struggle.
Wow. Yeah.
So there was like actual warfare going on in the countryside in the late 20s and 1930s that people don't understand. It doesn't really get, told to us in history. And that's where the Ukrainian famine myth comes out of. You have the Nazis who are now coming to power and Randolph in the U.S., this mega press mogul. And they sell this story of the Ukrainian famine, 10 million people dying, 20 million people dying in Ukraine, something like 80% of the population, 50% of the population of Ukraine being killed in this forced famine by Stalin. And then the weird part is that they also, 10 years later say that happened again in Ukraine, where like 10, 20 million people died from the Soviet, from Nazi Germany. So like the numbers just don't work out. Like they're just repeated numbers.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. Sorry, my computer's about to die. It's not plugged in for some reason. So I need
you
to
do your
fix that.
thing. Yes. We've also touched a little bit on the double genocide myth.
It's charging.
Yeah. Awesome. I was just saying we've touched a little bit here on the double genocide myth here, and a little bit of looking into it. You find that Nazis are spreading this propaganda.
Yes.
And who would have thought? It's just actually when so many people believe something like that, it's like, hold on, did the Nazis actually lose the Second World War? It seems like they're winning. They're winning a lot of propaganda games here. Right? They got a lot of propaganda wins.
And this all happens within, again, 20 years of its existence, 30 years of its existence, mega wars after mega wars. You have this massive class struggle in the countryside. This outside pressure forced the Soviet Union to look internally. That's why you get more of the Soviet Union turning away from, let's say, the Spanish Civil War, right? Because the Soviet Union was funding the revolutionaries at one point and then stopped funding. Why? Because they predicted that it was going to kick off for them and they needed to reserve the supplies for their upcoming war, which they knew was coming. So, there's certain things like that the Soviet Union was a little bit defensive on.
Face.
Because it had to be defensive because that's its material reality. Something that, let's say, like China didn't have as much of an issue with. to be honest. Not that it's, a knock on China. It's just that that's the material reality that they face. Like China dealt with its civil war and revolution for 20, 30 years, kicked out the nationalist Kuomintang, kicked out the Japanese, and then fought us in Korea, and they relatively have not faced any action since then. They had their own internal issues as well, but every country does. I think that's also something that people forget about, that like every country is facing its own economical, material issues. And then we're talking about countries that come from a deeply backwards development. Like Russia, the Soviet Union, the Tsarist Russia, I should say, because it includes more than just Russia as we know it, was extremely backwards. The imperialist or monarchical China in the 19th century was deeply ravaged by colonialism. These are just things that people don't, I think, want to give these countries a break. And I think they're kind of deserving of a break. Like, we're not perfect. Like, the systems that we create when we eventually get into power isn't going to be perfect. When the working class of America takes over, is the system we're going to make going to be ideologically pure for all of us? No. We're going to have internal contradictions to deal with, just like all these other socialist states have, or they did have. And we're talking about the Soviet Union. Give them a little break. Like, let them deal with their internal contradictions. You don't be so quick to judge, especially when you live again on this side of imperialism. You don't live on that side of imperialism, having to face its brute edge.
Absolutely. I'm really happy you framed it that way as well, right there at the end. Absolutely well said. Good shit right there. I don't know. I didn't want to interrupt, and I feel like I did. I'm sorry, man.
It's okay, man. Don't worry about it.
We're vibing though. I think we got a good thing going. I'm digging this. So we touch on some of this historical stuff every now and then, but of course it's hard to find great content to interact with, and reading books on stream isn't always the most exciting stuff in the world. So it's good to get this little condensed version of history. Yeah. What do we got in chat that you want to respond to? I got a yelling cat over here.
It's Rathbone in the chat
Rathbone.
said Soviets and Nazis teamed up to carve up Poland in 1939. I think people misunderstand this as well.
Okay.
You have to remember that before the Molotov-Ribbentrop Act, right? That was this Neutrality Act that led to the split up of Poland between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. The Soviet Union approached Western states, the UK, France, the US, and said, let's form an alliance against Nazi Germany. All those states declined to form any alliance against Nazi Germany. The Soviet Union did not want to go to war. It did everything in its power to avoid war. And maybe there's some criticism of like appeasement in a way, like, we leveled to, let's say, like Neville Chamberlain in the UK. But it's not the same dynamic at all. And again, it's this different sides of imperialism. The Soviet Union is facing just a decade or so after a class struggle that was deeply, deeply destructive to its countryside. And then 10 years before that, it was a civil war that, again, the UK, Germany, all these countries invaded. And then before that, you have the revolution and World War I. This was a nation that did not want to engage in any military action, that it wanted to be left alone to develop on its own, to develop its production. And it knew that that wasn't going to happen. It knew, if you read any of the writings from Stalin, from any of the leaders there, that they were very aware of that this was a clicking clock issue, that it was just bound to blow up. So that's why you see the Molotov-Ribbentrop Act. And also, people forget that the Soviet Union saved, I forget the exact number, but it's over 1 million, I want to say, 1 million Polish Jews by doing that, by invading Poland in a sense. They exported or deported, if you want to use that very negative sense, the Jewish population from Poland and moved them far east because it knew what was bound to happen. And again, this wasn't like we didn't know the Nazis were going to go after Jews. The entire Nazi media ecosystem was anti-Semitic and was anti-Semitic against the Soviet Union. You know, that's where we get like Judeo-Bolshevism. That term coming from was Nazi Germany saying that the Bolsheviks were in bed with, you know, the Jewish cabal. So the Soviet Union, which also was the first country, I want to say, to put into its constitution protection for the Yiddish language, for example. This was a nation that was very aware that it had a duty to protect the Jewish community. I want to say in total, they saved 3 million Jews by taking them from Eastern Europe before the war started and taking them deeper east because they knew what was going to happen. And they were planning on doing mass evacuations for the entire community, but prioritized the Jewish community. Again, this is something that people don't know, and that's fine. But this is where it comes to, like, if you're a socialist, if you're a leftist of any tendency, maybe give these socialist societies a break from the propaganda you've heard all the time and dive into the sources, dive into primary sources. All these people that were alive back then they wrote stuff. There's records. The Soviet records, which all got publicly released after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, are very extensive. Like, this is, like, a lot of this is public knowledge now. But again, this is Western propaganda.
Here's Nays referring back to the famines in recent history. It's only that we've been able to do this recently. We got the synthetic fertilizer, and a lot of people are forgetting at the time, there was also a Dust Bowl in the United States. I think that was happening simultaneously. So was the United States also genociding its own citizens?
And I want to say this, I said this on the last show we did, that I forget the exact number, but it's like over 1,800 famines happened between, let's say like 50 AD. I forget the exact framework, right? The exact timeline, but it's like, let's say 50 AD to 1900, right? Mm-hmm. There was over 1,800 famines, like almost one every 2 years, basically, right? There have been one famine in China since the People's Republic of China took over. One.
No.
And its 75-year history, there's been one. When before that, it was one every 2 years. Is that God. Because of the People's Republic of China doing the right things? Yeah. Same with
central planning. You can't beat it.
Ukraine was a hotbed for famines well before that. There's documented famines in Ukraine in the 19th century that killed untold amount of people, especially back then, because the reporting from Tsarist Russia, the record keeping there, was deeply inadequate compared to the Soviet Union, of course. So it's hard to say like what the real numbers were back then on how many people died, but it was a regular occurrence in Ukraine, in that area, for massive famines. And then again, when you transport to 1930s, when it's it's bound to be another drought season, bound to be another bad harvest. It's almost like clockwork. And then you have this massive class struggle where you have this, capitalist class in the sense, in the kulaks, going and burning fields, killing half the cattle. Like imagine half the cattle in Ukraine just being killed. Imagine half the cattle in the U.S. Just being killed. Imagine this, right? Imagine like Bernie Sanders took over, right, in 2016. He wanted to nationalize meat production. Okay. Yeah. And all the meat producers simultaneously colluded to be like, you know what? We're going to kill off the livestock right now. We're not going to let them get it.
They totally would.
We're not going to let this socialism happen.
They totally would.
And before we stop them, they kill half the population of livestock in the U.S. Like that's the comparison here.
This is okay. There's another Gravel Institute piece came out recently. It's actually about the quote unquote potato famine, and I have like, my Irish heritage. My parents taught me about the potato famine when I was a kid. Oh, the potatoes, they went bad one year. You couldn't grow them. This is not what my parents sound like. Anyways, and no, to call it a potato famine actually gives a W to the colonizers, and we often don't understand that. Yeah, I guess what I'm finding is that there's often another side when you look at history, and a lot of times you find that one side is being told by Nazis. You know what I mean? So, if your information is coming from the Victims of Communism Foundation, maybe double check your numbers. You know what I mean? Yeah.
They use declining birth rates in their numbers.
Really?
Like think about this. Like, for those who understand this concept, like, imagine like this Tsarist Russia had like 1,000 births a year, which is obviously it's a very small number, but just a number for you to get your head around. And then the Soviet Union took over, and then rapidly developed society, the economy, urbanization, industrialization, right? So, and also gave women like equal rights.
Can't have that.
Which is common. And so the birth rate drops, which is, again, common when all those things happen. We have rapid urbanization, rapid industrialization. You have women getting greater rights economically, politically. You see declining birth rates. You see it in the U.S. You see it in every country in the world where development happens, birth rates drop. Let's say the Soviet Union took over and 800 babies were born in a year instead of 1,000. The Victims of Communism, the Black Book of Communism specifically, would say that 200 less babies is 200 babies killed by communism. So you take this on a mass scale, like that. And this is, again, something that Adrian Zenz, the chairman of the Victims of Communism Foundation, and also works for the Heritage Foundation, I believe
sounds accurate.
I believe is the think tank he works for, when the CIA outfits. And, he was the one that was the first one to report about the Chinese genocide against Uyghurs.
There
right?
it is.
One of the massive aspects of that was declining birth rates. That was one of the evidence he used. And he also misreported the numbers drastically. I forget the exact difference, but for like the forced sterilization of like what's it called? Like IUDs. He said like 80-something% of the population based off these numbers, right? And if you look at the numbers, it's like 0.8% of the population, something like that, like got birth control. Like it's something that's like it's something drastically different. Where like he's literally taking the decimal point and moving it over 2 times.
Wow.
It's horrific. But anyways,
have you? Okay, are you into Jakarta method?
I have not read the book. I have it. I do know about it because I've seen some like interviews with Vincent Bivens. There's one he did with Vijay Prashad, because obviously Vijay Prashad wrote Washington Bullets, which is kind of like Jakarta method, but it's a little more wider in scope, I would say.
I gotta check that one out. Yeah, good recommendation.
It's also a little bit shorter, I think, as well. It's a little more to the details,
Nice.
but I think it covers a little more in terms of topics. They did a talk
do they count Hitler's suicide as a victim of communism?
Yes.
Let's go.
Every Nazi soldier killed in the war on
They
the
count
Eastern
Nazi soldiers.
It is counted as a victim of communism. Yes.
Oh my God.
The Russians that were killed, or the Soviets that were killed by Nazi Germany, are counted as victims of communism.
That just broke my brain. No.
Meanwhile, like 8 million people like die every year from like lack of clean water and like hunger. Like these are things that like the profit model cause. So like that's why these people die. But like we have we have Holocaust every year, if you want to think about it that way. Like in the span of 5 years, I forget the exact number, from like easily preventable deaths in capitalism, comes out to around 20 million a year, right? If you add up like lack of clean water, curable diseases, stuff like that, right? It comes up to about 20 million a year die. In 5 years, capitalism kills more from just easily preventable stuff than what they claim communists killed in 100 years. It's like, even if like we want to go by their number, if we go by their methodology, it would be way worse than that 20 million too. But just plain preventable deaths, capitalism beats it every time. It's way more destructive. You don't have to count transatlantic slavery. You don't have to count the genocide of indigenous people. We don't even hit those yet. And we beat communists, the worst number you can find for communists,
Okay. I don't know where to go from there. Other than just, yeah, you got something in chat?
Rathbone saying Soviet Union wasn't communist as detailed by Marx, Engels, or even Lenin. It absolutely was. I mean, one, just read Lenin's work because he was alive during the Soviet Union. Like, I don't understand why you would think that. Now, maybe you might have this opinion, Rathbone, where like post-Stalin, we get into like the revisionist side of the Soviet Union, and that's fine. You want to go down Grover Fuhrer's work about Khrushchev and his revisionism and his lies against Stalin. I'm absolutely in favor of that if you want to go down that road. But Lenin was literally like one of the leaders of the Soviet Union in its inception for the first like 5 years. The new economic program was created by Lenin. If you read Stalin's work, it completely tracks with Lenin's work. Lenin's work completely tracks with Marx and Engels, because if you read them all, they all track. If you read Civil War in France, Critique of the Gotha Program, Principles of Communism, Communist Manifesto, and Capital Volume 1. Let's just go with that. You read that, right, and maybe Origin of the State and Family and Private Property from Engels. You read that from the classics of Marx and Engels. You just have to read State and Revolution from Lenin, and it completely tracks. You don't have to get into imperialism, highest stage of capitalism, what is to be done. It tracks. Then you get into Stalin, and you can read Foundations of Leninism. You can read Dialectical and Historical Materialism. You can read Anarchism or Socialism. For all of you anarchists out there, I highly recommend that as well. And it all aligns. One of the easy things to do when people talk about, like, can China have like some controlled markets? Can China have commodity production right now and still be socialist? Like, it's a very easy thing. Go to Principles of Communism, section 17. And it's like a paragraph long. It's like 3 sentences. And it explains the zigs and zags of class struggle and how these things are not done overnight. So I highly recommend people just, again, society is a little bit of a break. Do a little bit of research into what they wrote, because people like Stalin, Ho Chi Minh, Mao, like these, or Fidel, Che, like these are people that are these are titans of our ideology. These are titans of our movement. These are people that led basically a billion plus people into a better life. We should respect their sacrifices and do at least the very least of reading their work.
Okay, so I guess we're sort of just exploring the difference between the Marxist-Leninists and how anarchists look at the world. I think Rathbone said anarchist, and I think they're a lot more well-read than I realized, and that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, so I don't know, like, for someone that's sort of new to these arguments, what else might we need to know? I don't know where to go from here.
It's one of those things where the amount of reading you have to do is a lot, and I do understand why people are hesitant to do that. It takes a lot of time.
Is there a YouTube video? I'm bored. I don't have the time for this. No, to be honest, I didn't read State and Revolution. I just read the intro to it. I think I mentioned this to you before.
Oh man,
it was a really great intro.
Oh my God, you gotta go back and read that whole thing.
I was just like, yeah, I think I get the main idea. I like it. I like the vibe.
If you read like one thing in all of theory, like State and Revolution is like the book to read, because it summarizes a lot of Marx and Engels' points. It brings them into this modern context of the modern context for Lenin, at least, and one that looks a little bit more like what we have. And he details like how these systems of change can happen, like how it functions, like materially speaking, like how does a revolution happen? What does a state look like? Like, how does it function? How is it created? And he does this in like 70 pages. Like, it's a very small read. And then he details the arguments of anarchists and counters them in great detail. And then he counters the Social Democrats and their arguments. And again, he does this all within 70 pages. So if you're a leftist, right, and you've read no theory, but you know of Social Democrats, you know of communists and Marxist-Leninists, you know of anarchists, you know of these people, you know, maybe you've seen some clips of like Richard Wolff or like David Graeber or something like that, right? State and Revolution is this almost this perfect encapsulation of 200 years of theory. And it's a pretty accessible read as well. I highly recommend it, Dan. And for anyone out there that has, you got to read it. If you only read one book in theory, just read that. I get reading Capital is daunting. You don't have to do that. You don't have to read Capital. You really don't.
I read 1984 Animal Crossing, and that's enough theory for me. I'm a shit lib. Vote blue, no matter who.
Dan, unfortunately, I do have to run. I have to pick up my other kid at school.
I'm just enjoying the vibe we got here, Matt. I feel like we can keep you on.
I keep looking at the time, and
I'm sorry we kept you so long.
No, and I was looking at 2:10. I'm like, I can go like for 5 more minutes. And then I was like, I can go for 5 more minutes.
Okay. Well, then, really quickly, real quick, mention what you do and where people can find you so they can support your work, Matthew.
If you want to get in contact with me, for anyone in the chat that has any more questions, I would love to answer any more questions. Contact me on social media at Matt Hunter MCR on Twitter, especially Instagram. If you want to follow any of my work, Trending Now Network on YouTube and Patreon, those are ways to support me and follow my stuff. If you want to watch podcasts, documentaries, all that fun stuff, check it out there. If you want to see any combat sports stuff, because that's kind of my day job, Mixed Combat Radio is like my combat sports YouTube channel, my personal one, and I also do a lot of work with promoters in the local LA area. So if you're in the LA area, Los Angeles area, and you want to go to a show, you want to go to a gym or something like that, hit me up.
Awesome. We're dropping those links right now in the chat. Matthew, thank you so much for being with us today. You're great. I'd love to do this again. It's just it's nice to chat with you and get some of these ideas out there. I understand we have disagreements in the chat, but I like the way that we handled that in a good way. I appreciate that, and maybe this gives us a way for us to continue to dig into some of these issues and educate ourselves, because that's one of the main things that I'm trying to do here. All right, Matt, thank you again. You in that way, you've been a great guest. You've helped to educate us. All right, Matt, I'm going to let you go.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Love your face. Thank you so much. Solidarity. All right. All right. Whoops. That's just the outro. It's nothing personal. Love your face. All right. Support on Patreon.